So are there any comments on this information that we received on the administratively closed cases? If there's not.
Well, just so I understand, so we didn't have the administratively closed cases available at this point, right? Just checking in to make sure.
So if I may, Chair French?
Sure.
In terms of the change with the ordinance, the cases are presented to the board for your information. There's not findings that are made by the board regarding cases. The details, and again, we can work out some of the specifics, but the details that are most relevant for the board in terms of at this point would be how many times per se a policy comes up in the various cases and what that particular finding is. But as to the specific details of each case, because the board is not making a assessment on the finding or changing the finding, then that was what seemed to be the most relevant for the board's review, with the exception, of course, of the disciplinary cases, the sustained cases. Those the board did receive the materials for the disciplinary action packet, which is something that's new, provided to you on the front end, so that you would be able to make some determination about the appropriateness of the discipline that's being recommended.
Member Galloway. Oh, I'm sorry. Member Nixon, was that it? Or did you have something?
No, I'm going to see how this plays out because I'm not happy with this at all, but I'll let Member Galloway take it away. I'm just stewing on it for a minute.
I have to agree. I don't love the way that this is coming about. And so as I was thinking about it, I'm thinking, well, can we still receive the complaint so that we have something to compare the findings from the agency to and not have that be overly burdensome for the staff? Is this a matter of we need to see these policies in a graph form so that we've got like this way to measure and track and have this information rather than just spelled out? I don't think that this is a first stab at the new way of doing things, and I don't think that this is it. For me, I need something more. Or maybe it's even just a transition piece because we've had so much information that it's a little bit of a shock to the system to have just this. And so I'm really eager to hear what thoughts the agency might have as to how we might be able to provide this information back to the board in a way that's a little bit more meaningful, that gives us a more complete picture without completely reverting back to the way that we need to find some middle ground here. I think that's
you cut out there a bit, but I think I understood what you were saying. So, in terms of providing some additional information, the second, this is just sort of, okay, this is what we, if you take the interpretation or the way the ordinance reads, this is one way. Another opportunity or another option would be not particularly challenging would be to provide, say, the original complaint and probably the findings letter, which would provide that information. The idea behind, of course, and the change of the appeal process was that the board wouldn't be delving in on the front end so much, so that if an appeal came through, it was more objective, so that the citizen had an opportunity to really plead their case and the board didn't have a prejudge on the issues. As well as time saving as for both the board and for the agency. So there's a lot of factors for why the council, chose to go the direction that it did. And it was definitely both with board and agency input to help streamline things. So like I say, this is not I'm sticking to this way. It is just the first blush of, let's do this. If the next month, basically, what we'll do or I'll do is provide a, the letter and the complaint and, see how that goes for you, if that's a agreeable to the board.
Well, I would just like to say that before this change was made, I think it should have been agreement between the board. Something should have been sent to us. It should have been an agreement between the board and the agency on the interpretation. Second of all, I just want to say Interim McDermott was correct about the discussion we had in the subcommittee about the appeals and, the way to handle them. But that discussion never came up in any city council meeting or with any city councilor that I talked to whatsoever. But it did come up during a subcommittee meeting. But this is a bit of a shock, and I think in the future it would help if the agency and the board works together before making such drastic changes to the process and procedure that everyone is accustomed to, even considering the citizens. So I think this is something that we're going to have a working meeting with the board and the agency, and this is something that we can discuss during that meeting. I don't think it's going to be I'll provide this and this. I think this is something we all will decide together on what the board wants to see, whether they make a determination, whether they are voting on it or not. The board still has the option of deciding what they want to see and what they don't. So I think that's something that we need to discuss. Yes, Interim Director.
Yes, and it's not that I was trying to dictate. It's just because board decisions have to come from the board and from meetings. And since the ordinance had passed on the 4th, so we didn't have a meeting to be able to discuss this, hadn't been able to see what a final version, published version was going to be for sure. So this is, present this to you, and then, yes, we can have a working meeting. But of course, in terms of a change, you won't have another meeting unless you call a special meeting to address how the May cases will be presented. So that's why I'm providing that information, because the board won't be able to vote as a board saying we want this or we're saying this. Working meeting, then I can certainly, have some information to go forward with it. But I'm just telling you, at minimum, that was what I was thinking, because you won't have another meeting before your May meeting, and like I say, unless you had a special meeting. So that's just what I'm putting out there.
Okay. And I understand that, but I still think that we should have kept it status quo until the board did have that discussion. But that's just my personal, but you know what, Diane, to make it easier on the board and staff, I will try to schedule a working meeting before our next May meeting, if at all possible. Member Nixon.
I think that'd be a good idea. I'm not convinced that this approach here aligns with whatever the new ordinance is. It may be a stab at it, but I think it's going the wrong direction. So I think that it would be necessary to, and I don't feel like drawing it out on this meeting, but I think a special meeting to discuss this and realign this would be much better. This, to me, it's looking like from the surface, it's contradicting what we're even supposed to be doing here. With not seeing a majority of the cases. So yeah, we definitely got to go back to the drawing board and take a look at this.
Okay. Ms. Gooch.
Thank you, Chair French and Member Nixon. One of the things I would propose to help save board time and also get everyone focused and working together is maybe considering us the case review subcommittee taking the first stab at the review of the ordinance changes and how those impact what the board is doing with its audit function, to get a starting point for any kind of work session and get really into the changes in the ordinance so that everyone's on the same page. And I believe, Member Nixon, you are on that subcommittee. So it might be a good opportunity to get started on the work instead of the whole board trying to delve into that.
Member Gooch, you had said that if possible, we can have a red line version or a highlighted version of the changes. I think you were going to provide that to me. Maybe we
yes, Chair French. I was going to provide a red line version of your policies and procedures for you and members. But if the board would like the red line version of the ordinance, I believe I have that version easily available to provide if you'd like it.
Okay, well, I'll leave that up to that subcommittee because I think that is something that we had already discussed, if I'm not mistaken. But if I am, then I will say, will that subcommittee take that on? Member Crawford.
Yeah, I have two quick things. I think that I am on the case review committee, if my memory is correct, but I'm
And you
feeling
are.
slightly fuzzy about that. So, Chair French, would it be possible for you to maybe email out the committee assignments just to reassure me that I have the right idea? The other ask I was going to make, and this might already be covered, but I think if the CRC is going to take this on, Ms. Gooch, it would be awesome if you could have a highlighted copy of the PNP for the next CRC meeting, which I'm not sure when that is, but the CRC was not meeting regularly, so there may not be an established time, and we might just have to, myself and Member Nixon might have to sort that out.
And I'll be happy to send that list. I should have done it. Sorry about that. So yes, absolutely.